Moonrise, Chapter 7. Relax. Jasper and I sat out by the lake. I was snuggled up against him as I sat in his lap. His arms wound around my waist, pulling my body closer to his own. My hands wandered up and down his left arm, slowly and with rhythm, as I felt his many scars. It was Sunday, early in the morning. It was completely dark outside, and the only lights that were visible were the lights from the east side of the river, heading towards town. Emmett had returned from hunting already, without Edward. Edward had gone to watch Bella sleep, again. He did that a lot now. Every night he was at her house. A short vision flashed before my eyes, and I smiled as I came back to the present. "Peter and Charlotte will be here soon," I murmured to Jasper. He looked down at me and pressed me closer to him. I turned around and kissed him softly on the lips, and then leaned my forehead against his. He released my waist so I could stand up. I stood, and he followed right behind me. He took my hand, and we walked into the house and up to our room. I walked into our closet and changed into a blue dress that ended at my knees. I put on a diamond necklace and a set of blue-studded earrings. Jasper had put on a gray polo with white stripes and khaki pants. Jasper pulled me to him, but then Emmett came bursting through the room. "Jasper!" he half yelled. We both walked out of the closet with wary looks, and Jasper's hand now harmlessly around my waist. "Rematch," he insisted. Jasper and Emmett play wrestled a lot, and the last dozen times Jasper had won. Emmett insisted on a rematch, but continued to lose. Now they were betting on it. But this time was different. "No," I hissed at him. "You can play your stupid game later. Jasper is going to be all scuffed up and dirty when the two of you get back, and he doesn't have time for that," I told him with a frown. Emmett chuckled. "Jasper, are you really going to take that from your wife? Come on, dude. Take charge." Emmett cheered as he pumped his fist in the air. I glared at him. "Rosalie!" I yelled. "Get this giant teddy bear out of our room." Rosalie came in as soon as I finished the sentence and looked at Emmett. "Would you stop bothering them? Anyway, you're not going out either. We will have company soon," she said with a smile. She had grown to love both Peter and Charlotte. They had come to visit a handful of times, and Rosalie loved their company. Emmett groaned and glared at me as Rosalie dragged him out of the room. I laughed at the two of them and turned to Jasper. He chuckled at me and ran his hand through my hair. I smiled and leaned into him. He lifted me off my feet and folded me into his lap as we sat down on the king-size bed. "What would I do without you?" he asked, with a smile that reached his eyes. I laughed and kissed him on the cheek. We heard the light pacing of two sets of shoes hit the ground softly, and the displacement of air as two individuals ran quickly to our house. We both stood and went downstairs. Esme was there waiting as well. Carlyle was at the hospital, taking an early shift, and would be returning around 6. The footsteps slowed, and I heard them hit the paved ground. Moments later, we opened the door and welcomed our guests. "Hi, Peter," I said, as I went up and hugged him. "Hello, Alice," he said with a laugh. "I guess we should have known that you would have seen us," he said as he nudged me. "Of course," I quipped with a bright smile. I pulled away from him and went up to Charlotte. "Hi, Charlotte," I murmured as I hugged her. "Hi, Alice," she replied. Charlotte's hair was curled this time, with a headband secured in it. She was the only person I knew that was actually close to my height. Jasper greeted them as well, followed by Esme, Rosalie, and a sulky Emmett. "Is Carlyle at the hospital?" Peter asked Esme, who nodded in reply. "And Edward?" Charlotte asked as she looked around. Her eyes rested on mine for a moment, and then she looked up at Peter. We all grimaced at hearing that. They were the reason why he wasn't here right now. But then again, Edward was taking things way out of control. I started, but trailed off, not knowing exactly what to say. Edward's fallen for a human girl, and is insisting on spending all of his time with her, Emmett said with a shrug. Peter and Charlotte looked shocked. They just nodded, not knowing what to say about that. We all walked into the den. Peter let go of Charlotte's hand as she followed us to the glass coffee table in the center of the room. Charlotte, Rosalie, and I started planning a shopping trip to Seattle that we would leave for in the evening tomorrow. Esme joined in after a while. Jasper, Peter, and Emmett walked outside and jumped the lake easily. I saw that they were going to the clearing to play fight. I rolled my eyes at how insistent Emmett could be at times. Dawn approached, and Carlyle came through the front door. He welcomed Charlotte as Esme got up and hugged him gently. Then they both disappeared into their room for a while. The boys returned as the sun started to rise above the horizon, and I choked back my laughter as I looked at Emmett. He was covered with spots of mud and dirt on his pants and shirt. Jasper was a little scuffed up, but nothing unmanageable. I stopped laughing and looked at Emmett. "So I'm guessing you won the rematch," I joked, and everyone in the room started laughing. Esme and Carlyle came down the staircase to see what was going on, and started laughing as soon as they saw Emmett. Emmett glared at me, but he had a smile on his face. "You will pay for that, psycho," he growled playfully, and started walking toward me. My eyes widened at what I saw he was going to do. I got up quickly, but it was too late. He pressed his muddy body close to mine and gave me a long hug. "Let me go," I whined. "You messed up my dress," I yelled at him, but he didn't listen. "Why, you going shopping later?" he said with a laugh. He finally dropped me, and I glowered at him. "You are the worst," I grumbled as I looked at my messed up dress. I smacked him across the chest, and he pretended to be in pain. Everyone was doubled over in laughter, except me. I huffed and stomped up the stairs to change clothes quickly. This time I changed into a hot pink dress that had most of my arms and shoulder exposed. I took my earrings out, and this time didn't put in another set. I walked back downstairs, and there were still a few laughs and giggles. Jasper took me in his embrace and calmed my angered emotions. I sighed quietly and gave Jasper a silent thank you. He squeezed me for a moment and then freed me from his embrace. Emmett and Rosalie had disappeared up to their room, and I heard running water. We all sat around and talked for the entire day. I was really glad we didn't have to go to school. Edward had come home for all of 5 minutes around noon and greeted Peter and Charlotte. It wasn't a very nice welcome, but I guess it was a start. He left right after that, and Peter and Charlotte looked at Jasper and I. "Did we do something wrong?" "He didn't seem too happy that we were here," Peter noted as he looked at the door. "Edward is just being Edward," I sighed. "He has a lot going through his head right now, and he's been really grumpy lately," I said to them. The sun slowly started to sink behind the trees, and Rosalie, Esme, Charlotte, and I prepared to get ready to leave. Esme decided to come with us, because Carlyle had to leave for a night shift. We all got into Rosalie's BMW, with Esme in the passenger seat. She reversed the car, and we were soon speeding down the driveway, turning onto the main road quickly. The car turned onto the highway as the last remains of the sun disappeared behind the trees. We sped along an almost empty road for a while. Then we turned off and went into the mall parking lot. We parked quickly and got out of the car. Rosalie was in front, leading us to a store. It wasn't hard to guess which store she wanted to go to. Rosalie was fond of Victoria's Secret. I didn't mind the store, but Jasper and I just weren't like that. We decided to split up, and Charlotte and I went to Pink to look for cute dresses. We found a few, and then went to the dressing rooms to try them on. I slid one over my head and looked at it in the mirror on the wall. Then I walked out of the small room, and Charlotte was there in a white dress that went about 5 inches above her knees. She twirled, and then looked in the mirror that hung on the wall. The back was cute. It was opened, and then had lace halfway. "I like it," I said to her. She smiled, and then turned to look at my dress. My dress was black, and had a slit on the right hip, and fit snugly to my body. "I love it," she said happily, as I turned in the mirror. We did this about a dozen times, giving constructive criticism, and occasionally switching dresses. We walked out of the dressing room with the dresses and a few blouses that we were planning to get. We walked to the cashier, and one checked me out while the lady next to me took care of Charlotte. I handed her my platinum credit card, and her eyes grew large as she saw it. In my mind, I rolled my eyes as she swiped it carefully. "Thank you," I said to her, and then grabbed my bags as we walked out. Esme and Rosalie were waiting, Rosalie having 2 small bags in her hand. I knew Esme wouldn't buy anything from there. She and Carlyle were not like Rosalie and Emmett either. We walked through the mall, shopping at various designer stores. We left when the mall closed and started to drive home. We arrived around 11:30 and walked in with our bags. Jasper, Peter, and Emmett were playing Mario Kart at the moment. I walked upstairs to put away my bags and then came back down. Charlotte followed behind me from one of the many guest rooms we had. Esme came downstairs as well and walked into the kitchen. I followed in after her and saw her arranging new flowers in a vase that had dying flowers. I walked up next to her and silently helped. I grabbed another vase from the table and started to fill it with water. Esme broke the silence then. "Alice?" she asked, and I knew that she was worried about something. I looked up at her with a smile, and she continued. "How are you so sure about all of this?" she asked. I sighed. "I've only seen 2 options. Either he falls in love with her and she becomes one of us, or he kills her. We all know that Edward won't kill her. He can't," I murmured quietly as I smelled the flowers. "What if... I don't want to see him heartbroken over this if it ends badly," she whispered as she looked down. "He won't. Trust me, Esme. This will work out the way it's supposed to," I said with a small smile. She smiled at me. "I have no idea where we'd be without you, Alice. I didn't hear the last part of her sentence, as I was swept into a vision. I came out of it and saw Esme looking at me with worried eyes. "Is everything all right?" she asked me. "Fine. There are 3 nomads traveling through this area within the next week or so," I stated with a shrug. But we both knew that this time it would be taken more seriously because of Edward. She sighed. "That poor boy. He's going to lose his mind," she murmured softly. She stepped forward and gave me a gentle hug. "Thanks, Alice," she said quietly. I nodded. "Always," I said with a bright smile. I picked up the glass vase of flowers and walked out of the kitchen and into the den. Peter, Charlotte, and Rosalie were now playing the game, and Jasper and Emmett were sitting on the couch. Their heads turned as I made my way out of the kitchen doorway. I walked to the coffee table and set the colorful flowers in the center of it. "What were you 2 talking about with the nomads?" Emmett asked. "Nothing important. 3 of them are passing through within the next week is all. They're in Seattle at the moment," I murmured. Everyone's head turned my way at hearing this. and Jasper's hand wound around me protectively. "I don't think they were there when we were there," I said. "I would have seen that for sure," I reassured them, and they went back to playing the game. "I wonder what Edward's going to think of that," Emmett said with a laugh, and then Rosalie hissed and stalked out of the room, crushing the game controller in the process. "Rose," Emmett said as he went after her, but she slammed the door in his face and walked outside. He sighed and opened the door quickly. We could hear their footsteps disappearing for a while. We all sat there quietly. The room was tense. I didn't need Jasper's gift to sense that. They didn't know how diverse we were about the human girl coming into Edward's life. Rosalie hated the girl. Whenever someone talked about her, Rosalie's mood would change, and she would have a tendency to leave the room. Emmett was unsure about her as well, but mainly because of Rose's reaction. Jasper didn't trust her. He thinks that she is going to cause problems for all of us, and he doesn't think it will work out. I have gotten him to look at the situation openly, but I know that it will take more time for him to understand. Esme, Carlyle, and I were the only ones who really had positive thoughts about this. We all had an open mind, and were trying to be supportive of Edward. Right now, Peter and Charlotte were getting a look at what we all thought of the Edward and Isabella situation. Esme came out of the kitchen with another vase of flowers and looked toward Peter and Charlotte. "Please excuse them. This situation is taking a toll on all of us and causing a couple of problems," she said hesitantly as she looked at the door. I got up and picked up the crushed remote that lay on the ground. I frowned at it and then threw it away. I walked up the stairs and came back down with the new remote still in the package. I took it out and handed it to Jasper, throwing the box away. They had turned the game console off, and Peter and Charlotte started to walk up the stairs to their guest room. Jasper and I's eyes followed them up the stairs, and then we turned to Esme. "They feel like they're intruding," Jasper said in a whisper so they wouldn't hear. Esme just shook her head. "They aren't. It's great to have them here again," she said with a sigh. I grabbed Jasper's hand and tugged on it, causing him to stand up. I heard Carlyle's car turn onto the drive, and we all waited there for a moment until he walked inside. He looked at our faces and was soon confused. "What's wrong?" he asked warily as he walked up to Esme, wrapping his arms around her and placing a kiss on her cheek. "Rosalie," but she trailed off as Carlyle nodded his head. Jasper and I started to walk up the stairs, but I stopped. "Carlyle?" I murmured. His gaze fixed on mine. "Yes, Alice?" "We have nomads passing through the area within the next week. I think it's only fair that we let Edward know," I said. He nodded. "All right," he said. I turned on my heel and went up to my room. I walked in and shut the door quietly behind me. Jasper looked up from where he stood by my bookshelf as I went to sit by my laptop. I turned it on and it hummed to life. I started to design a black dress that I had thought of yesterday. I had no idea where I was going to wear it, but it looked perfect. I worked on the dress until I had the color scheme, pattern, and fabric the way I wanted, and then I shut it down for now. I spun around in my rolly chair to face Jasper, who was reading on our bed. I looked at the title and laughed. "You've read that one before," I proposed. He chuckled and looked at me. "You've gone shopping before," he said to me. "A lot," he added with a smile. I stuck out my tongue and then walked over to him. I crawled onto the bed and into his waiting arms that pressed me closer to him. I grabbed the book from his left hand and looked at it for a moment. Then I marked its place and put it on the bed beside us. His hands moved around my body, and settled on my waist delicately. He brought his lips to mine, but before he was there, I brought my lips to his neck instead. I kissed a short trail along his neck and up to his jaw. His hands tightened around my waist, and he pulled me up to his face. He cupped my cheeks and kissed me fervently, and then pulled away. He sat up, and I wrapped my arms around his neck, my fingers touching the locks of his hair on the back of his head. I wrapped my legs around him and leaned my head against his solid chest. He kissed the top of my head and hugged me to him. Edward came inside the house then, greeting Esme and Carlyle, and then going up to his room. He stopped halfway up the stairs and turned around. "What?" he almost hissed. Instead of waiting for a reply from one of them, he dashed into our room. We both sighed, and I undid my arms from around Jasper's neck, rolling off of him. "Do you ever knock?" I asked. He glared at me instead of replying. "Edward," Jasper said. "She just saw it," he said, and drew me back into his arms. "They're only in Seattle right now. They won't get here until later, maybe in a few days to a week," I reassured him, as I replayed my vision in my head. He mumbled something unintelligible, and then nodded towards me. Then he was gone. I heard the front door shut, and we all knew he was gone again. Jasper and I sighed in unison, and he pulled me close to him again. "He is so worked up over nothing," he said quietly. "Jas," I said, "she isn't nothing to him. You must understand this from his point of view," I said. "How are you so okay with this? This could endanger all of us," he said as he looked at me. "Edward has not felt love in over 100 years, and now he's found her. I think that we should all be supportive of him. He is the only one who hasn't had his other half, and has had to live with 3 perfect sets for so long," I murmured to him. "How would you feel if you were in his situation with me?" I asked. "That would be entirely too complicated for me to deal with," he said with a shrug. I gasped and narrowed my eyes at him. A small smile broke through on his lips, and I smacked him across his chest. "Jasper," I said, and rolled my eyes. He pulled me in even closer. "I guess when you put it that way, I can understand," he mumbled. I nestled into him and kissed him on the cheek.